Well, let's now go back to one of our top stories today. Of course, we've been discussing the fallout from the SVB bank collapse and, of course, how much African startup founders are exposed to the fallout. We're chatting with journalist Mukhtar Oladumade earlier, and we had lost him. Let's see if we can get him back. Mukhtar, hopefully you can hear me clearer now. And I'll just reiterate my question, which was how much exposure African startups have to the SVB bank fallout, and also how significant SVB bank was to African tech startups.
Okay, before I got caught up earlier, I was mentioning how SVB was important to African startups because most African startups tend to look to the United States for venture funding. For venture funding and accelerators, we have most of the influential, most of the big startups we have in Africa are YC graduates or Texas graduates or have investors from the US. We're talking of Chipper Cash. We're talking of Flutterwave, Paystack, and these accelerators urge their portfolio companies to put their deposits in the US. YC had over 80 African startups in its portfolio. Texas has over 67. So you can imagine how many African startups had money in SVB and in America. But most of the new startups we have now, after 2019, when Mercury and Brex became more prominent. Though the new startups tend to bank with Mercury and Brex because it's way easier to open an account. So most of the African startups we have in SVB are mostly the old African startups like Chipper Cash. And the Chipper Cash CEO came out on Sunday and he's assured his customers that the blowback from SVB's fallout on them was minimal, and the fintech had only $1 million in the bank. So we're seeing that SVB has a mixed report. It has some African startups, but not a lot of the new ones. Mostly the old African startups that were banking with SVB.
Well, reading your article, Mukhtar, you said that uncertainty is the name of the game right now. So is the expectation that we'll see more ripple effects here in Africa going forward, or do you expect to see the impact not as wide-ranging as we fear right now?
I don't think it will be as wide-ranging as we fear right now because the African startups will get their money back. The US FDIC has assured SVB customers that their deposits will be restored 100%. Everybody will be made whole. But initially, there was a lot of confusion, and there was some staff of a fintech here in Nigeria were talking to TechCabal basically about how anxious they were about whether their company can survive because of how limited and how hard it is now for African startups to raise funding. And funding is important for runway. If you had funding and you have runway, you can hire more staff, your staff will be employed. But if the African startups don't have the necessary funding they need to pay staff, a lot of people will be laid off. So that was what was causing the fears initially that, oh, if we're not going to get our money back, how are tech workers in Africa going to cope with the layoffs that might happen because of that? But now that everybody is assured that their money will be returned to them, there's been a lot more calm.